Everyone. Sorry if my estimates are a little bit off in the chat for those of you who are there already. Sometimes I'll give a few, indications about when I'm ready, and then something will happen real quickly, and I got to go run deal with it real quickly. So, here I am, ready to go. I'll try not to go too quickly or too slow so that we can move on with our day, but still absorb all the information that we need in order to have a good show. And as you know, for these day text videos and live streams, what we do is we work our way through the biblical books. We're working our way through Genesis right now, and we go according to the translations I've done to date. You're welcome to use your own translation, but I do these shows and we consider the text according to what I'm most familiar with. And while I am familiar with other translations, I have done my own to a point where I feel comfortable presenting it to everyone for discussion and enrichment so that we can benefit from the material. And also, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, this is a time to do it. Or you can put them in the chat below if you're unable to make the live stream. So we're working our way through Genesis chapter 2. You can see the prior videos if you want to start from Genesis 1 and catch up to where we are. We're not that far along, but we're not going to go through every single chapter and every single verse in Genesis because I haven't done them all. And as I explained before, while you can use other translations, I'm not going to connect my translation in the day text with other translations because I won't be able to comment on the different texts in the same manner or to the same extent. And I don't want to get off on comparative differences in translations unless they're really essential to the discussion. Maybe they involve a disputed word, a text, critical reading. That's okay. Then we can talk about a few things. Otherwise, I want to get right into the material, because I want us to understand these texts according to the manner in which they were written and preserved for thousands of years. I don't believe in the time that I've spent with these texts, all of them, the biblical books, but I'll speak for Genesis at this point since we're talking about it. I have become so much more appreciative of the material, having studied it more closely, because it's often difficult to have a detailed understanding of all the different ancient biblical books. But the more you get familiar with each one, the more you realize certain things people say or have said about them that may not be true or not completely true. And you're like, oh, okay, I see now why maybe that happened, or why these people think that way. Or maybe it's more like, why do they think that way? It seems like it's pretty clear. Maybe some things just got lost along the way, and clarity was one of them. Either way, we're going to pick up today in Genesis chapter 2. And I've recently done these texts. So right now I'm really concentrating in Proverbs to try to finish the Greek and Hebrew book of Proverbs. But because we're doing our day text in Genesis, and because the connecting material in the first few books is so important, and I only had a few sections to do to really complete the first 3 chapters, I went ahead and did it. So I finished chapter 2 yesterday and reviewed it again this morning. Of course, I've been working on it a while. And when I spend time with translation, I focus on it, try to really reflect on the material, look at all the different texts, make sure I have the best understanding possible before I release it to the public. Of course, it's not a published edition yet, but I still believe it's accurate and useful. You let me know if you see anything that you like or don't like about what we read compared to other versions. But here we go. So I'm going to put the reading on the screen. You can look at it in the description below, along with all the best text support for the book of Genesis. I try to do that with each version of each book of the Bible, so that you have a good understanding of the transmission history of these different texts. And then, so you can get the translation below. And for members of the CW Jaho forum, you know that I keep all of the translations I've done today, not all of the notes and things I'm working on the side, But, I'll add more and more of those as I finish more of the translation text and get the book of Proverbs out. And I'll add a lot more to Genesis as I go back through it. So it'll take me a while to get all of the books done, but Jah willing, I'll get as many as I can or all of them done. Now, Genesis. So let's bring it up. I'm going to pull it up from the description below. And we'll just read it together. Sometimes I'll do that, and sometimes, I'll just read and kind of express it in a way that hopefully is not boring. Hopefully I'm a mildly entertaining in a way that at least is consistent with the biblical text, right? The material we're considering. It's not like we're reading comedies or material where you can be overly entertaining. That's not my goal. But I do want to make it come alive. Still, I think reading it together is one way we can look at it together and then discuss it as we do. And sometimes I do put the readings on like this, but mostly in our Sunday shows. I'm going to try to do it more and more in the day text videos as well. Or you can just follow along in the description below or in your own copy. Either way, Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, Hebrew translation. So Jaho God began to take Adam and to rest him in the special place of Eden, to work it and to watch over it. I'm going to stop real quickly here and make a point because in two prior video shows in the Genesis text, I've used instead of special place, special area. And I changed that yesterday when I finished these texts. It just sounds better. Obviously, place and area are pretty much the same, depending on your usage, but special place sounds better than special area. So I changed those two prior references to be consistent with this one. Same word. Basically the word for garden. But it also involves a sort of enclosed special area. A place that Jaho considered special by enclosing it the way he did. Setting it off from the surrounding areas. So he began to take Adam and to rest him in that special place in Eden. Because remember, in the beginning of Genesis chapter 2, which in my translation starts in verse 5, you can review the prior videos to see why that's the case. And I think it'll make sense, but you can let me know if you have any questions. Either way, at the start of this account of creation, it goes back to the time before there had yet sprouted the trees on the earth, because the account says that there was not a man to work the ground. And so it says that Jaho made Adam from the particles of the earth and then put him in the special place. So at this point, we then reviewed different features of Eden and the surrounding areas, the different rivers. And so, obviously, Adam was a moving creature and in and out of the special place to the extent that Jah allowed him and he chose to go. But at some point, he took him and it says he rested him in the special place. So that indicates a sort of lingering, right? Obviously we think of sleep or, relaxation in an area. We're thinking of lingering, spending time in an area, not wandering about in the different locations, obviously all new to Adam, right? So that'd be very interesting, very special. But Jaho wanted to take him and rest him in the special place in Eden. Eden meaning luxurious, pleasurable, special place of luxury, of pleasure. Why? Hebrew translation, the rest of the text, verse 15, to work it and to watch over it. So consistent with verse 5 of my translation where there was not yet a man to work the ground. And that also could be inclusive of the different things that we learned about in our last day text video regarding the surrounding features and all the different products and resources that could be mined and found there, from gold to special coal, anthracite coal, pleasant resins, different types of precious stones. So working the ground at some point could also have ultimately, if not even at this time to some extent, have involved the accumulation or obtaining of those things. But Jaho at this point is taking him specifically to Eden, to linger there, to rest there, and to work it. So this indicates that regardless of whether Adam had any intervening period where he was outside the garden, doing whatever, either wandering or resource finding, at this point, he's not doing that. He's definitely in Eden, resting and working it and watching over it. Okay, Greek translation, let's see how that compares, or this compares to the Hebrew translation we just read. Verse 15. Then Lord Jaho God took the man whom he formed, even to place him in the paradise to work it and keep watch, to keep watch. So pretty much consistent with the Hebrew text. Now it doesn't say specifically to rest. Instead of saying to rest him in that part, it just referenced him as the man whom he had formed. So a little bit of a difference there. All right, verse 16, Hebrew translation. Then Jaho God ordered against the man as he began to say, because every tree of the special place is a tree from which to eat, you will eat. Verse 16, Greek translation, Lord Jaho ordered Adam, saying, from every tree that is in the paradise for food, you will eat. Verse 17, Hebrew translation, continuation of Jaho's order against the man. But from the tree of the knowledge of what is good and what is bad, you will not eat from it. For by the time, or in the day, or in the time, you eat from it, you will indeed die. Verse 17, Greek translation, our last day text reading, we'll talk more about it. Continuation of Jaho's order against Adam. But from the tree of what it means to know good and evil, you will not eat from it. But on whichever day you might eat from it, you will start to expire in death. Now, let's take a look at that last part a little bit closer here, because you might notice, there's a little bit of a difference in terms of expiring in death versus indeed dying. So the reason for that is the way that both the Greek and the Hebrew text read. They basically say, to die, you will die. Or by death, you will die, depending on how you understand the dative case of the Greek. So the Greek term used it's a dative form of thanatos. So it says, by death, you will die. Apothnesko, future form, second person, singular. So, in death you will die. That's how the Greek reads, or by death you will die. To me, that indicates a process leading to an eventual outcome, right? In this, or by this, with this, however you understand the dative, you will die. You've eaten from the tree, now you have this condition, you will die. The Hebrew says basically the same thing. It uses an infinitive form of the word to die or to be killed. And then it uses an imperfect form of an imperfect second person verb for you will die. So to die, you will die. Instead of making it more of a process leading to death in the Hebrew translation, you could take that as more of an emphatic way of expressing what the condition that will result. And so, but however, I do believe you could also translate the Hebrew text there the same as the Greek. They're basically the same. To die, you will die. With death, you will die. By death, you will die. By death, you will die. You see what I'm saying? It indicates something happens by which you will die in the future after eating from it and getting death. And that's why in the Hebrew text it says, by the time you eat from it, right then, you will indeed die, or you will die or you could say, to death you will die. If you really wanted to be hyper literal in a way that I don't think would make grammatical sense in English, of course. So that's why we don't translate it that way. We don't translate it, literally or rigidly as an infinitive and a second person future verb. So we have to account for the English sense and also reflect the Hebrew and Greek idiom, the way that they are written, which can either be an emphasis on the death resulting from eating or the expiration by death resulting in death, right? The expiration by the death condition, by death, with death. The Greek seems more clear in that respect by using the dative. And so, in death you will die, something to that effect. You will start to expire in death. I might change that a little to expiring you will die. Because you will start to expire in death. Maybe that's a little bit too expressive. So again, but it still captures essentially what the text says. I'm just more talking and reflecting about the English style that I've used, recent translation, and just did it. And it does capture the text, but I'm thinking of the best way to express both the ending of the Hebrew and Greek translation of verse 17. I'm going to leave it the way it is for now, because it represents both manners in which I think you could understand either text. That is, as an emphatic way of referencing the resulting death condition at the time or in the day that you eat from it, the Hebrew translation, or as the means by which you will die, in death, by death. Thanato, dative. In death you will die. You will start to expire in death. I think I can shorten that a little bit more and change the wording to be a little less wordy, I guess is the way I want to say it. But it ultimately is if you see where I'm going with it, it captures the condition resulting from the eating of the tree, from the tree of the knowledge of what it means to know good and evil, and then it ultimately leading to Adam's death. It doesn't obviously state that you're going to die the moment. Well, in one sense, yes, in another sense, no, right? It's really what it's saying. That at the time you eat from it, to die, you will die, Hebrew, or in death you will die. So really, there is an immediate sense in death that Adam entered or would enter and did enter, and Eve, when they ate from the fruit. At that moment, at the time they ate from it, they were in death, or they had then taken through their decision, their incorrect choice, which is what sin is, that death or the means by which death would result, which is sin. Sin leads to death, just like Romans teaches us, Paul. We see that essentially stated here by Jah. You make a bad decision, you go against what I say. This is the one thing representing. Why is that? We're going to get to that in a moment. Okay, so the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Let me finish this part. So if you understand what I'm saying, it definitely shows a condition resulting from the eating of the tree from which they're not to eat that then results in their death. Okay, there's no contradiction. In fact, I think the Hebrew text and the Greek text are pretty explicit in terms of indicating a resulting condition at the time it happens that ultimately leads to them dying, or you dying. You will die. So I think that point is well established. I'll look closer at the wording of the ending of those texts just to make sure, but I wanted to give at least both options. I felt I could give the Hebrew as the more emphatic rendering in terms of the emphasis on death. You will indeed die. Although I think that really does indicate a process as well. The Hebrew text could be seen that way. And then the Greek and with the dative thanato, by death, in death you will die. Okay, now let's talk about the tree. So, interesting, isn't it? This tree of the knowledge of good and bad or evil. Let me ask you this. Without eating from that tree, how would Adam know good or evil? How would Adam or Eve or anybody that then came into the earth, without eating from that tree, how would they know what's right or wrong? Give you guys a second to think about that. Think about that for a second. So you have this tree. It's in the garden in the special place. He's sending Adam in there to take care of the garden, to work it, watch over it. Tells him you can eat from all the trees because they're trees for the purpose of growing food. So you will eat from them. But the tree that is the one that will result in the knowledge of good and bad, do not eat from it. Because at that time you will die or receive a condition leading to death. Why? We'll talk about why that order was given in a moment. But how would Adam or Eve or anybody know? I'm going to check your questions. How would Adam or Eve or anyone know what's good or bad without eating from the tree? Well, who told them not to eat from it? Jaho. So they knew that, right? They knew not to eat from the tree. At least at this point, Adam, and then he told Eve. So we know for sure Adam had the knowledge of good and bad at that point. It was just so limited. Adam had not yet done or contemplated doing things that Jaho would then potentially say, no, don't do that, or even don't do that again, right? If Adam didn't know not to do something, right, then it's not a sin. Because he doesn't know it's something not to do. That's the whole point. Adam is in a condition where he cannot be held accountable for anything except that tree. Everything else, Jaho was prepared to allow Adam to choose to do and then determine whether or not he would intervene or stop him or tell him not to do it anymore or good job, right? Jaho made Adam to do things, to decide on his own in ways that he would not be punished for. By eating of that tree, every single thing he did wrong, he was punished for. Do you understand the significance of the tree now? It's a big deal. It's often held up as this myth of the tree, the apple, it doesn't say apple. It's always an apple though, right? It's always held up as this thing like, what do you mean? they're missing the whole point, aren't they? And maybe we did too. I know I didn't always see it clearly. The tree, before Adam ate from it, represented independence from Jah, which he was prepared to grant, just like his other sons. But Adam did not have to choose it, right? He already knew that was bad according to the one who gave him everything. So he had that. He knew that. Yet he could still choose it if he wanted to, made in the image of God. We're higher than the animals. We have a lot of power and thought and option. But it comes with a price. Jaho was trying to save us from having to pay that price. Because he only ordered Adam not to do one thing. And the one thing he ordered him not to do, it's not like it was the only thing of its kind, right? All the trees that were made for food were available, except this one. And I had some people tell me, well, it's almost like he's setting Adam up for failure. Oh, really? How so? Right? If I have a couple special treats I like, and I put them in the kitchen, or let's just say I have one special treat to make it more consistent, and I put it in the kitchen, and I tell my kids, hey, I just want this one thing here. If you could leave that there, then there's no problem. You can have every other treat. And I filled the cabinets, the refrigerator, everything you like to eat. Just don't touch my one treat, okay? Because then I'll have to take all your treats. Something like that. I'm giving an analogy. Because, even though we don't want to punish our children in ways, if we don't teach them certain things, and I'm using a very friendly analogy, right? The proper analogy to this type of thing, with Adam being a man, being given an assignment to work and to watch, he's really an employee, right? He's a worker. He is a worker made by Jah, just like the angels work for Jah, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing today, and we work for whom? Other humans. Working for Jah is the ultimate. He gives you one order so that you don't make so many mistakes that you're going to be punished so you can't work for him. And he'll teach you the things you need to know along the way without holding you accountable. Just don't take that knowledge for yourself. Because the moment you start making decisions on your own, the moment you as an employee start doing your own thing and don't follow the company's protocols and best practices, what happens? They fire you. Or if you're not down with it, you quit, right? Well, that's a lot more difficult circumstance than what we have here. We have Adam more really in the role of a child, but as a man, because he's given everything, although he has to work the land. So it's not like he can just sit on the couch all day, right? And not that all kids do that. You see what I'm saying? He basically is given everything. Kind of like Job. And remember what Satan complained about Job? He said, you give him everything. You protect him. Take it all away. Then we'll see about Job. Okay, so basically this account, we're going to get to the involvement with Satan. This is just an early type of Job, right? Much bigger and more important in the sense of it being the first human. But Job and Adam were both at some point protected, given everything in the sense that they were blessed by Jah. So they had it much easier than, say, a person working for a company or something like that. But Jaho makes it easier for those who proclaim him and take on that work. So either way, we all have to do what we have to do. My point is that Adam had the situation set. And all he had to do was not eat from one thing. He was not programmed not to do this or not to do that. He could do whatever he wanted pretty much at this point that was physically doable. And obviously Jaho was assigning him work, having him do things, resting in the pleasure of Eden. And then obviously likely would have had him go out, as he told Adam and Eve, to become fruitful and become many, fill the earth, and then make use of the resources in ways that are much better than today, but still fit for human, utility and usage. From cooking to electricity to all the things that we can do even now, just better, without bad choices and corruption involved. So that tree, if Adam had not eaten from that tree, he could not have been punished for anything else unless Jah ordered him not to do something else. Jah was making it as easy as possible, but still giving them what? The very thing he was keeping from them so they didn't die too early. If you have children, do you let them go out late at night at 8 years old? Maybe they're big, maybe they're physically able to walk and talk and they can even use a phone, maybe 10. Would you let your 10-year-old who's physically capable, able to do things, helps you around the house, does some stuff, still growing, would you let them stay out till midnight with their friends? No. So there's certain things that as a parent, you want to try to keep your child from going through before they're ready. We all do that. Every parent does that. No exception. Unless you're just a terrible parent, right? Unless you're an opposite of a parent. All right. So if that's so consistent with our nature, it's not that hard to see why Jaho would try to prevent Adam from only the things that would really be a problem for him, in order so that he could progressively learn and yet not be punished by get into so much trouble. So in the back to the situation with the day text reading, he's putting Adam in the garden to take care of it, to watch over it, gives him this order. The one order is for his protection, because otherwise if he makes bad decisions, he has to be punished, because he knows. This is the key issue. Knowing. Remember what I said earlier, that Adam could, make a lot of decisions even if they were bad and not be punished for them because he doesn't know. Remember what Jesus said even to the Pharisees and scribes who were abusing him, harassing him. He was talking about other people, and they spoke into the situation. And said, because Jesus was referring to other people who were blind. And then they said, we're not blind also, are we? And then Jesus said, well, you say you see, so your sin remains. Right? If they had been among the blind, they would have been forgiven. You see what I'm saying? If you're blind, you still get the consequence, right? You fall into the pit. But people understand, right? The blind person fell into the pit. If you are someone with eyes, right? You know, you have knowledge, you can see. Well, why are you falling into the pit? People are going to look at you like, what are you, stupid? Are you, I almost said the R word there. Not that I won't, because I think that word and the way I use it is okay. But still, whether it's dumb, stupid, or retarded, if you're a person with eyes that can see and you walk straight into a pit, are you going to get the same sympathy you're going to get, or a person would get who's totally blind and who falls into the pit? No way. Well, that's what we're dealing with in Eden. So Jah was trying to keep Adam from seeing the pits so that he wouldn't be held accountable for falling into them. See, in his case, he would have fell into them because he wasn't ready to make all those decisions yet. It's not just a question of walking and avoiding the pit. The pit in this analogy for Adam is all the decisions. Right? If he starts making bad decisions and he knows it, no one's going to have sympathy for him. He's a person with sight who fell into a hole. Right? What are you doing? Get off your phone, look down, watch where you're going, right? Adam, as a blind man without the knowledge of good and bad, much more sympathy, more mercy, not held accountable. You see the analogy and how I'm making it? It's not a perfect one, but I think it fits. And it definitely fits with Jesus' reference to the Pharisees as those who say they see and so their sin remains. Right? So once Adam started to see, once their eyes were opened and they could tell what was right and wrong, and then made decisions that were wrong, knowingly, eyes open, they had to be held accountable because they're in Jah's image. We all are. That's why we all die, because we're all seen and still making bad choices. Some more or less, right? And some of us apologize. We try to do better. We don't all fall into the same pit. And we sure don't all follow blind people in the sense that they really do see and they still fall in the pit. Right? Because the Pharisees were the ones claiming they saw, yet they were the blind leading the blind. Right? They were held accountable for it. So in the same way, the knowledge of good and evil is that. Do you see or not see? Did you know what you were doing or not? It makes a big difference. It doesn't mean you can't make mistakes knowingly. We do. That's the point of forgiveness. The difference with Adam is he didn't have to do it. We have a condition that is inherited in a way that forces us in some desire sense. We're motivated by our desire to such an extent in our inherited condition that we have a limitation Adam didn't. So his not having any limitation and knowingly making a choice was held against him. It would have been the same with Jesus. But every decision he made was what? What Jaho told him. So how would Adam and Eve, back to my original question, I deliberately left it unanswered to hold it over to this point, because this is the big one. How would Adam and Eve have known what was good and bad unless they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and bad? Because whatever Jah told them. Just like Jesus. You see this similarity now? It's exactly the same. All Adam had to do was everything Jah told him. Now you might say, well, that's like, no fun. If someone is telling you the absolute best choice to make in every single thing you're about to do, how is that abusive? How is that anything but the most helpful person ever? And how does that not then tell you what the right choice is going forward in everything? It's not like Jaho is going to have to tell you every single thing you ever have to do over and over and over again, right? You hear it once, you see it once, you should get it. So he was going to let us keep doing all these things once he told us what was right and wrong. And he made it so easy to start with by giving us one thing to show what was right and wrong, as he would have then likely gone on to tell us the rest of what we were to do and not do. That's exactly what Jesus says he did. Who is Jesus? 1 Corinthians 15:45, last Adam. They're the same. They went through the same things, only Jesus did it a lot worse, in much worse conditions. Right? A whole world full of opposition. Adam had no opposition. He had everyone for him, except the resistor, who didn't even come to him because he knew better. But he did go to one like him because he thought he could do better. And even though he did, she eventually gave it to Adam, and he did too. So they both fell into it. The pit. Why eyes open, not wide shut? That's a retarded metaphor. And a dumb movie too. All that stuff, lame. Focus on Jaho. All these things, they're real. That's what's been happening this whole time. this choosing of right and wrong on our own rather than listening to what Jah says and then doing that right. Can't do it that way perfectly now, but that's the goal. Right? That's what Jesus said. I'm the model. Here's what I came to do. I do only what the Father says. He tells me, I hear, I do. Right? Who does it better than that? Who said he follows the Father and does everything he says more than Jesus? Who's more powerful and higher than Jesus? Except the Father who put him there and whom he perfectly expresses. It doesn't get any better. You see what I'm saying? In other words, submitting yourself entirely to what Jah says is right and wrong not only makes sense because he made the world full of what's right and wrong, he knows the best right and wrong. He's the one who laid it all down, set it in place with the option of those in his image of choosing to do their own thing or follow him. He does not force you to do it. But you and I get the consequences if we don't. That simple. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is also very simple. It was just the one thing that allowed Jah to begin telling Adam what good and evil were, so that he didn't have to figure it out on his own and then pay the price before he was ready to choose. Once Adam had learned from Jah what to choose, what to do, then he could have continued to do it on his own. It's that simple. It's just like a parent and a child today. We do the same things, or we should, help prepare our children for the world. We let them make certain decisions to help them grow and to become their own person, but we watch them, we tell them the right things, and we hope they listen and do what we've learned is correct and will help them, right? Versus having to go through it on their own. We say the same things. You can go through it on your own, learn the hard way, or take the easy way, and I'll give you the answers, right? For some reason, we all choose the hard way. It's because that's what our first parents did. But we have the knowledge of good and bad, so our choices that are bad are held against us. However, we have freedom through Christ, whereas the Jews who offered sacrifice, according to the law, received temporary forgiveness. We have it permanently. While we may die, we still live, and we have an indestructible life according to the text that goes right to Jah. And then he gives us a new body. 1 Corinthians 15 all over again. So I trust in all these things. They make perfect sense to me. We'll talk more about Adam and Eve in our next several day texts. But I think from today's reading, it's clear that Jaho took Adam and allowed him to rest in the luxurious, special place of Eden, to work it, not just to kick back all day and hang out under a tree, right? He was working it and watching over it, taking care of these things. Must have been an amazing place, an amazing time, all these things happening, and we can still see the remnants of the areas like we did in yesterday's video. So knowing now as we do, or should, that the tree represents the very thing it says, knowledge of good and evil, because it's not the tree, it's what Jaho said, right? Whether Jaho says don't eat from this tree or don't do these things according to the Mosaic law, the reason they're important is because of what Jah says about them. And if later on he says you can eat from it, well then it's okay, right? Just like he changed the law according to the things that could be eaten or not eaten in terms of what we decide, without stumbling our brother or sister overly, right? My point is that ultimately we're not going to need to eat from the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of it, that is, because we already have it. But once we receive life again, we'll have the option of eating from the other tree that is mentioned that we'll get to in our subsequent videos, the tree of life, which appears to have been a tree they would have been able to eat from had they continued to follow the ways of Jah. And I say that not only because of the way the Garden of Eden is set up, because it's also paralleled in what we read in our Revelation readings about the special place or garden of God where Jesus says he will allow those who are faithful to him to eat from that same tree. So we'll talk about it more. We'll make some connections, but we'll stay in Genesis and with the text times I'll bring up certain Christian associations because we just finished reading through Revelation, and it highlights and makes use of some of these things. Trees of life, it refers to in the future world. So for as Christians, it's interesting for us to go over this information, not only from a historical perspective, but also when we consider its potential spiritual fulfillment.